Javishva Paramahans Parifrajacharyas Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki Shri Giri Govardhan Ki Sankirtan Yagya Ki Go Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Don't touch it. Don't even breathe near it. Have we got in? Do we have Instagram on or not? Okay, that's all right. That's it. Okay. Is it raining outside?
Yes.
Ooh. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 14. The story of King Vena, text 18. If you got your telephone with you, well, if you got Prabhupada's books on your telephone, then, anyway, let's just do it. We'll try and do it responsively. Yasya Rashtre Pure Chaiva Bhagavan Yagya Purusha Ijyate Svena Dharmena Janer Varnashraman Vitai. Yes, Yarastre Pure Chaiva. Bhagavan Yagya Purusha. Ijyate Svena Dharmena. Janar Varnashraman Vitai. Yasya Rashtre Pure Chaiva. Bhagavan Yagya Purusha. Ijyate Svena Dharmena. Janar Varnashraman Vitai. Yasya Rashtre Pure Chaiva. Bhagavan Yagya Purusha. Ijyate Svena Dharmena. Janar Varnashraman Vitai.
Yasya Rastre Pure Chaiva. Bhagavan Yagya Purusha. Ijyate Svena Dharmena. Gyaner Varnashraman Vitaha.
Yasya rastre pura sachaiva Bhagavan yagya purusha Vijate svena dharmena Janaya vashnaya rama yita
Yasya raste pure chaiva
Yasya raste pure chaiva
Bhagavan yagya purusha
Bhagavan yagya purusha
Ijyate svena dharmena Janai varnashraman vitai
Janai varnashraman vitai. Ladies.
Yasya
rastre pure chaiva
Bhagavan yagya purusha
Ijjate svena dharmena Janai varnashraman vitai Yasya rastre pure chaiva Bhagavan yagya purusha Ijjate svena dharmena Janai varnashraman vitai
Yasya rastre pure chaiva Bhagavan yagya purusha Ijjate svena dharmena Janai varnashraman vitai
Yasya rastre pure chaiva
Bhagavan yagya purusha
Ijjate svena dharmena
Janai varnashraman vitai Yasya whose Rashtre in the state or kingdom Pure in the cities Cha also Eva certainly Bhagavan Supreme Personality of Godhead Yagya Purusha, who is the enjoyer of all sacrifices. Ijyate is worshipped. Svena, their own. Dharmena, by occupation. Janai, by the people. Varnashrama, the system of 8 social orders. Anvitai, who follow. Translation: the king is supposed to be pious, in whose state and cities the general populace strictly observes the system of 8 social orders of Varna and Ashram, and where all citizens engage in worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead by their particular occupations. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The state's duty and the citizen's duty are very nicely explained in this verse. The activities of the government head or king, as well as the activities of the citizens, should be so directed that ultimately everyone engages in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The king or government head is supposed to be the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and is therefore supposed to see that things go on nicely and that the citizens are situated in the scientific social order comprised of 4 varnas and 4 ashrams. In the Vishnu Purana it is stated that unless people are educated or situated in the scientific social order, comprised of 4 varnas, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra, and 4 ashrams, Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas. Society can never be considered real human society, nor can it make any advancement towards the ultimate goal of human life. It is the duty of the government to see that things go on in terms of Varna and Ashram, as stated herein, Bhagavan Yagya Purusha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is the Yagya Purusha. As stated in Bhagavad Gita chapter 5 verse 29, Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasam. Krishna is the ultimate purpose of all sacrifice. He is also the enjoyer of all sacrifices. Therefore he is known as Yagya Purusha. The word Yagya Purusha indicates Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna or any personality of Godhead in the category of Vishnu Tattva. In perfect human society, people are situated in the orders of Varna and Ashram and are engaged in worshipping Lord Vishnu by their respective activities. Every citizen engaged in an occupation renders service by the resultant actions of his activities. That is the perfection of life. As stated in Bhagavad Gita chapter 18 verse 46, Yata pravritir bhutanam yena sarvamidam tatam sukarmana tam abhyarchya siddhim vindati manava, which means, by worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all-pervading, man can, in the performance of his own duty, attain perfection. Unquote. Thus the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Shudras, and Vaishyas must execute their prescribed duties, as these duties are stated in the Shastras. In this way, everyone can satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. The king or government head has to see that the citizens are thus engaged. In other words, the state or the government must not deviate from its duty by declaring that the state is a secular one which has no interest in whether or not the people advance in Varnashram Dharma. Today, people engaged in government service and people who rule over the citizens have no respect for the Varnashram Dharma. They complacently feel that the state is secular. In such a government, no one can be happy. The people must follow the Varnashram Dharma, and the king must see that they are following it nicely. Okay. Yasya rashtre pure chaiva, Bhagavan yagya purusha, ijjate svena dharmena, janar varnashramam vitai. The king is supposed to be pious, in whose state and cities the general populace strictly observes the system of 8 social orders of Varna and Ashram, and where all citizens engage in worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead by their particular occupations. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swananiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachade Chatarne Sri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchkalpatarubhyas Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Paditanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Yes, well, you do find through Srimad Bhagavatam there's a fair number of verses which are discussing subjects along these lines. What are the duties of the rulers? That's discussed, Prabhupada would discuss that quite often. And how should society, how should the people in general be organized? What system should be used? Should any system be used? Or even it would be best if no system was used, like anarchy. Years ago, and I mean like 55 years ago, I read a book about anarchy when I was a teenager or something like that. A book about anarchy and how society could work very nicely if there was anarchy. Some sort of optimist, I think. Sure. Anyway, but the first point which the verse is making, and which Prabhupada addresses actually in the purport, is that if a king, or, as Prabhupada says in the purport, it's not just a king, but whoever's the government head, could be a president or prime minister. These are currently the main posts which the head of state occupies. But whoever it is, whatever kind of arrangement there is, if the person who's the head of state is pious, then it will be possible to see that or understand that if you look at the people. If the people are, well, particularly, Prabhupada says, strictly following Varnashram, then you can know, aha, the head of state must be pious. Yes. If the head of state is not pious, then even if the citizens, or however many of them, are trying to be pious, it won't work very well. It won't work so well as when the head of state is actually pious. And of course, we know, I mean, it's a simple point, that so much depends on the head of the state. So much depends. In South Africa, we have, a democratic, like relatively quite liberal democratic system. I mean, maybe it's too liberal, but anyway, whatever. So, those who want to follow Varnashram or Krishna consciousness, they can. And they're not stopped from doing it. Unless, of course, well, if they're trying to do it properly, they won't be stopped or interfered with. I mean, obviously, if they're not following it properly, well, if they're not following it properly, that's just another thing. But if they create disturbances in society, in this country, well, it depends who they are, but they may be interfered with. Or not. It depends. But you go in some countries, and, in China now, it's difficult to have any sort of religious organization. It's difficult. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. In Russia, if you go back to when it was communist, it was extremely difficult even to the point of being impossible in the majority of cases. The only cases where it was allowed at all was if before communism you had been in that religion. Then you were allowed to attend some things, maybe. Generally only if you informed the government about other people who are following religion. Yeah. In Russia now, you can't follow whatever religion you like unless you cooperate with the government. Which our devotees generally do. But the first question the devotees get asked is, will you keep us up to date with what's happening in your, organization or whatever? Which means, will you tell on people? In a place like Singapore, you can practice religion, any religion, as long as you don't create any disturbances. As soon as you create disturbances, they close you down on the spot. So it depends. These things depend on the government. In sort of, quote unquote, normal countries, like the typical Western countries, America, Europe, then you're basically free to practice religion. But anyway, here the point is, if the head of state is pious, then it'll be reflected in the citizenry. And if the head of state is really pious, is a devotee, like very serious devotee, then he will primarily, the main thing he'll be concerned about before how much he's going to make from taxes and, all these financial matters. The first thing he'll be concerned about, as Prabhupada points out here, are the people, to what degree are the people following not just religion in a sort of non-specific sense, but specifically Varnashram. Varnashram. Varnashram, according to Sanatana Dharma, or the eternal standards of eternal Krishna consciousness, another name for religion is Varnashram. Yeah, it's just another name because it's essential. If people want to be religious, they have to follow Varnashram. If they want to be religious but they don't or can't follow Varnashram, then they'll end up not being very religious. Maybe just in terms of some sentiments and things like that. Because Varnashram allows for, not just allows for, but it involves performing your duties, the natural duties of your status, situation in the system of Varnashram, but specifically performing those duties as service to the Lord. That's it. Yes. So, anyway, Prabhupada's exploring the subject in the purport, and he refers to Vishnu Purana without quoting the verse. Who knows that verse? Varnashrama Charavata, something, something. Anyone know that verse? Okay, anyway, he gives the basic paraphrasing of the translation. In Vishnu Purana it's stated, it's that verse, Varnashrama Charavata Purushena Parapumano, actually I don't know. But that unless people are educated or situated in, because they're sort of synonymous, to be educated in what? Not just ABC, but educated in how to live. Unless people are educated or situated in, well, Prabhupada says, the scientific social order comprised of 4 varnas and 4 ashrams, society can never be considered real human society, nor can it make any advancement towards the ultimate goal of human life. That's a very powerful statement, isn't it? I mean, it's actually a dramatic statement. Yeah. People need to be situated in Varanashram. Otherwise, their attempts, even just to be human beings, like qualified human beings, or to advance towards the goal of life, they'll fail. They'll fail. That's why you see all the systems of religion that there are. You know, even Hinduism, which is the closest by far to Krishna consciousness, but it's a failure. It's a dismal failure, actually. The vast majority of people are into demigod worship as, you know, the thing, which means they missed the point. They're just way off the point. And Krishna consciousness, devotional service, even if they are worshipping Krishna or Vishnu like that, it's all in terms of like materialistic terms. I remember I met a man, I've mentioned this many times in classes, including just recently, somewhere in Reunion, I think, that I met one man in the temple room years ago, before COVID, like a good several years ago. And he had a paper plate, and he was proceeding towards the altar holding this paper plate. On it was 1 burfi, 1 agabati, 1 banana, and 1 250 milliliters clover. At least it was full cream milk. And somehow we got talking a little bit. I asked him, you know, what's he doing? And he said, yeah, I've taken a vow that for a month, every day, I'm going to offer ek burfi, ek kela, ek agabati, what else? And ek doso pachas milliliter dud to Krishna. And after a month, he told me, I want a new BMW. And I thought, gosh, that would be a good deal if it worked, wouldn't it? You know, invest 10 rands a day or something, whatever it is, and get a new expensive car. Yeah, so, you know, it's nice. It's a lot better than just being a materialist, like totally with nothing to do with God. It's a lot better than that. But as an attempt at religion, it's a failure. It's really a failure. If that's the idea, this is what we do. So what to speak of other traditions which are just, you know, in completely different spaces altogether. So, yes, Varnashram, very important. It gives a social context to religion instead of just, you know, a context which is just go to the church or mosque or temple once a week and pray, give me food, give me money, give me good health, and then go back home and go back to the normal everyday program. That's like, hopeless failure, actually. At least that gentleman, if he carried on doing like that and got some association, he might actually become a devotee. And that's why, anyway, people who come here, even if they're coming here to get money or good health or that sort of thing, it's definitely better. It's a lot better than following other processes, although unless they really start getting the actual idea, they're not going to get very far at all. So Varnashram is very important in that on the Varna side, the idea is that people will identify what is their natural type of occupation. Yeah. They'll identify, and in that way they can do what they're really suited to, and they'll be satisfied doing it. But it's to be done as a service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Like Arjuna, is a famous case. He had an idea at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita of not doing what was his natural occupation, which was to be a warrior. He thought of taking up the occupation more or less of being some sort of Brahmin, going to some solitary place, meditating and, just being very pious, something along those lines, which is more for a Brahmin. But when Krishna spoke to him, Krishna told him that don't do that, do what you normally do, be a warrior. Because, if you try to do something else, you won't be able to. You won't be able to do that. So Krishna told him, better to do your own duty imperfectly than to do someone else's even perfectly, which is hardly possible anyway, but maybe just temporarily. By making some special effort, you could do something which is not natural to you perfectly, just briefly. But after a while, your deeper nature will force its way to the surface. So Lord Krishna told him, just fight, because you're going to be fighting sooner or later anyway. So don't waste your time doing something else. Of course, nowadays, to really identify what's your duty, what's your natural sort of proclivity and what comes naturally to you in terms of occupation, it's not easy. It's not easy, and so many people are dissatisfied doing whatever they're doing as an occupation. Even we find, we do our programs amongst the student communities in South Africa and in many places around the world. And we find that sometimes some students change their course in the middle of the whole going through the student phase of life. And they change, from something scientific to something in the arts or something in management or something like that. This is not uncommon, at least. And those who sort of push on through and then work in that field, so many of them are not satisfied because it's not really them. So in this Kali Yuga, everything is confused. everything and everyone is confused. So we suggest to people who was saying, you know this devotee, Kesava Swami? I'm sure you've heard of him. He has a suggestion that find out somehow, maybe by trial and error, what is really your nature in terms of occupation, which is beneficial to people and through which you can make, as much of a living as you need. Sometimes, we, in a sort of joking way, tell people, find something, occupation, where you only need to work, where you work as little as possible, but you make as much money as possible. And just do that for a couple of days a week, and then the rest of the time do Krishna consciousness. But at the least, I personally usually advise people that try a few things, a few occupations, see what works the best, and then stick at it, something like that. Yeah. Because people don't know. People don't know what their natures are. Arjuna, he was born in that type of family, and he was trained like that, and physically and psychologically he was like that, and so it was just natural for him to work like a warrior. But nowadays, sometimes you find someone whose father, for example, was a surgeon, like performing operations. But the son or the daughter, they're just not into it. And they just do something else. So, if someone needs, for example, an operation, and the son or the daughter of the surgeon says, well, listen, my father was a surgeon. Would you like me to have a go? Not a good idea, because the person's not trained in it, and they're not trained in it because they're not interested in it. They're interested in whatever, business or some sort of, just whatever, something else. So you get that a lot. I've told you about my, not friend, but the person I know, Panditji, the taxi driver. You remember that from Vrindavan? I don't know if I should repeat it. But he drove us one time, and we came to a crossroads where you could go sort of to the right or to the left, like a fork. And there was a sign in Hindi, which I can read, but the driver stopped in front of the sign and he's looking at it. And I told him, we'll go that way because that's what the sign said. But he didn't believe me because I was a foreigner. So he got out and asked one man who was walking by. And then off we went on the correct road. And I understood that Panditji was illiterate. Panditji, he's a Brahmin, meant to be an intellectual, like a teacher. And in the most intelligent group. But he couldn't even read his own language, which he could speak, of course. He was a Hindi speaker. I mean, that says a lot. And you get a lot of that sort of thing. You really get a lot of that sort of thing. Like all the rulers of India, I don't know about Modi, but, like the Gandhi family, the Nehru family, they're all Brahmins. Yeah, Gandhi is traditional Brahmin family name. But they were all working as Kshatriyas, as government people. Yeah. So anyway, such is life. In Kali Yuga, it's a mess. It's a real mess. But Prabhupada's explaining here the ideal system, and, let's hope. Prabhupada did say that Krishna consciousness over a period of time would become so established that the governments would be following Krishna consciousness. Hasn't happened yet. I don't expect it to happen in my lifetime or your lifetime. Maybe, whoever's young here. You're only 23.
24.
Oh, well, okay. You're a baby. So maybe in your lifetime, who knows? But, Krishna consciousness is spreading massively, at least in some places, massively. So anyway, if the king or the president or prime minister or whatever is really a devotee, then their first priority, number one, will be to be checking on the people and making arrangements to help the people perform their occupational duties as a service to the Lord. Because Lord Caitanya, in Caitanya Charitamrita, Lord Caitanya discusses Varnashram. And Lord Caitanya says, if Varnashram, being a Brahmin, like an intellectual or, that sort of intelligentsia type of person, or a Kshatriya, administrative or warrior, or Vaishya, business class, or just a Sudra, just a factory worker, that sort of thing. But if people are working in these capacities, but not for Krishna, just because it feels right to do that sort of work, and it's not for Krishna, it's just done just for me, for my satisfaction in life, then Lord Caitanya says, such people will go to hell. They'll go to hell, yeah. Even though they may follow Varnashram, sort of like fastidiously, really follow it to a T, but leave out Krishna, Lord Chaitanya says, they'll go to hell. Yeah. So that the ideal head of state then will help the people in their occupational to do their occupational duties as a service to the Lord, not just go to the temple or the church or the mosque, on Tuesday for Hanuman, or on Friday afternoon if you're a Muslim, or Sunday if you're a Christian. Not just do that, and otherwise just live in whatever way. But the king will do what he can, or the head of state will do whatever he or she can to get them engaged in those ways. And of course it may not be possible to get them fully engaged, but the head of state will do whatever can be done as the first priority to get the people, as many people as possible, as engaged as possible in Varnashram type activities as services to the Lord, and then worry about the other things. Is the state budget being balanced, or how's the military looking and, all these types of things. So, yeah. So, and of course it's all connected where Prabhupada then brings in the aspect of yajna, of sacrifice. Because when you're doing your occupational duty as a service to the Lord, it's a form of yajna, of sacrifice. And, yeah, not just in the ritualistic or ceremonial or official sense, but your whole way of life is dedicated as like an offering to the Lord. It means having a spiritual program, like a morning program, spiritual program, and then doing your activity as a service to the Lord, giving what you can give, and what doing as much as possible, offering what you do as a service to the Lord. Means like, if you're a doctor, for argument's sake, in your waiting room, don't have, Vogue magazine for the ladies and motor car magazines for the men, or that sort of thing, but only have Krishna conscious literature there. And when you're dealing with your patients, if you're a doctor, introduce some Krishna consciousness to them. Yeah. Frighten them a bit at first. Oh, it looks serious. You might die. But you know what you can do. You can chant Hare Krishna. So in this way, one is performing sacrifice like the doctor would be performing sacrifice, but not just in the ritualistic sense, which generally people think of sacrifice. Yeah. So this is what Prabhupada's talking about here. And, so that the head of state will do that. Just imagine if a devotee became head of state in South Africa, they would really try and do it. But many of the people would not get into it because they're just too much conditioned by other activities and ideas. But still the devotee ruler, would try their best to do it and help them, really help them to do it. And maybe even, people who conditioned to following other traditions, but help them to see how to follow that tradition in a related type of way, a way which is more actually, got a relationship with Varnashram. Yeah. So there you go, devotees. Some thoughts on the subject. Any comments or questions? Jai Sachinandan Prabhu. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Shri Prabhu.
You made an excellent presentation, especially talking about the different governments. And it seems from that our best policy is to keep an open road to those governments and try to work with them to some degree while not trying to overly oppose them or overly endorse them. Some of them spend so much time trying to talk bad or this one is perfect, and neither one of those will.
Right.
But keep an open mind
Yeah.
to them at the same time.
That's
Does
true.
that seem like a best policy? Is
Oh,
there
yeah.
more you can say about that?
Well, just that if you start opposing them like openly, they're not going to stand for it. Particularly the sort of more, like authoritarian. Well, the story in Liberia, whoever he was, I forget his name, but whoever he was, was like the dictator. And somehow or other, this devotee lady, did you know her? Hladini.
No, I think the leader was Johnson or something.
Maybe he was Johnson, but I don't know. Or John Doe. That was actually the name of one of them. But her name was Hladini, the devotee lady. Prabhupada disciple who went there and somehow got to meet him, and he was kind of impressed with Krishna consciousness as she presented it. So, but then, it was like, basically a constant ongoing civil war type of situation. And one day she decided to go and preach to him that, stop this. Yeah. And become more pious and more Krishna conscious. And she got on his case. And so he personally killed her with some sort of automatic weapon. Yeah, he personally killed her. And some of the other devotees who were with her, but one or two of the devotees survived. And they told the story. So you've got to watch out, Yeah. Start getting too kind of smart with them in their terms. They won't take it. Like in Russia, we have quite a good relationship with Mr. Putin, believe it or not. But it's not easy. It's not easy at all.
So it's best they keep that open and try to oppose his different policies.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's not going to listen. But if you keep it open, there's a chance he may listen to at least part of it.
Yes, of course. But Prabhupada's point in regards to government was, a devotee king would be best.
Yes.
But, if you can't get that, then just whatever, if it's socialist or liberal Western style or even a dictatorship, just try and introduce Krishna consciousness as much as you can. Yeah, and therefore it doesn't really matter that much. Yeah, it doesn't really matter that much what style of government, as long as we're able to introduce Krishna consciousness, particularly to the people. We're more interested in introducing it to the people than the leaders, although we're interested in them too. But Prabhupada made the point that in a democratic situation, if you introduce it to the people, and if you're really successful in doing that, then because it's a democracy, if there's enough people who support Krishna consciousness, the government will have to support Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna. Jai.
Thank you much. I'm just wondering, at what stage did the whole thing just go wrong? The whole system of Varna ashram. Taken back to the time of Maharaj Pariksit, when
Right.
the Brahminical cult was kind of...
Yeah,
like
the Brahmins.
personality Kali corrupted the Brahmins.
That's right.
It was a gradual, like a domino effect.
From the top,
Yeah.
the Brahmins became corrupted because of that boy.
Yes.
And because the Brahminical society failed to sort of educate and control him.
Right.
Yeah. Therefore the whole community became degraded, and then there was like a ripple effect in the other Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra communities, because they haven't got the capability of maintaining Krishna consciousness without help from qualified devotees.
I mean, this pastime of King Vaina is in the Satya Yuga.
Oh yeah, it's Satya Yuga. It's right back in Satya Yuga, in the early stages of Satya Yuga.
Descendants of Dhruva.
Yeah, just a couple of generations. in. Smita Krishna Prabhu.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your astute analysis, and thank you for that. Also, please clarify my misconception. My understanding of Varnashram Dharma seems to align itself with the system, the Vedic system, where all the categories of the yoga ladder are involved. So that would mean even those in karma kanda, because if they do it properly according to the Bhagavad Gita, then they would progress. And even in karma kanda, the ultimate beneficiary is Vishnu. So if somebody is engaged in karma kanda, then it may not necessarily be in this lifetime that they would become a devotee. But would that still be part of the entire Varnashram Dharma? And would the leader then help them even in those stages?
Yes, right. Well, we read how Maharaj Yudhisthira would sometimes do demigod worship. Not because he was into demigods, in the sort of usual way, sense, but just to set the example for that type of person. Yeah. But it depends how they're being guided. Because karma kandya is not done. You don't just do it yourself. It's done under guidance of Brahmins. And so if they're really qualified, they'll guide the person so that in this lifetime they will generally become Krishna conscious, actually, or at least move in that direction. Because if they don't move in that direction at all, if they're just karma kandya people, and that's it, at the end of the life, who knows where they're going to go? It's hard to say. Yeah. They might take birth in a similar situation. It would depend. But if they were properly guided, but they didn't make any progress in that direction, it's not a good sign. It means they're like too habituated to materialism, and that even with proper guidance, they can't make any progress at all. Is that okay?
Thank you. So the devotee has a more important role than a leader, in one sense, because we try to create a good fortune for even people in karma kanda. They may not want to progress, but you give them some mahaprasad, that somehow the other they get the benefit.
Yeah, sure.
But one more thing else to ask.
Of course, just one thing, sorry.
Thank you.
If they're really into karma kandya, it's likely that there's some degradation in their lives. I mean, it would be hard for them to be just into karma kandya to the point they don't take any of the direction they're given for elevation. It's hard to imagine that they wouldn't be at least somewhat degraded. Anyway, sorry.
Thank you. Then, how would Varnashram Dharma include in a country people of different religions? You got Christians, Muslims, Hindus, and now you have a leader, like in a democracy. How would you fit that in?
Well, I mentioned that in a situation like this, a Krishna conscious leader would try to help people in other traditions sort of adopt some of the principles of Krishna consciousness. Not chanting Hare Krishna, probably, but some of the principles of, like the idea of sacrifice and chanting some holy names, chanting the name of Jesus, or, like that. They do like that. one imagines. They try, they definitely try to at least influence them in that direction. And not just walk in and tell them, listen, you know, you're following a low-class religion, we're going to give you the real thing now. Not like that. Prabhupada on many occasions, in that type of context, would say that we don't try and change people's religion, just try to get them to become a better Christian or whatever it may be. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
It's amazing they establish a good relationship with Putin. How were they able to do that?
We already had a good relationship with him personally.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
We were present when, not Modi, but one of the previous Indian prime ministers met with him. So, you know, he knew very clearly that at least in India, we're a really significant organization as far as the government's concerned. So he took us seriously. And they were serving, it was a banquet, they were serving drinks. And whoever the prime minister was next to Putin, and there was a few devotees quite close. And they were serving, I think, vodka. And Putin refused and said, no, I will not take alcohol. He said, I am Krishnite.
Wow.
But they cooperate with the FSB, means the Internal Security Service, the KGB.
Which is good that we're preaching. It's funny. I hate the conspiracy theories that so many devotees come up with, but one told me, did you know that Tamal Krishna, Swami gives information about ISKCON to the CIA? So I turned it all around and says, oh, that's perfect. So what do you mean that's perfect? I says, they're going to get it from somewhere. I said, I'm so happy they get it from him. So but he's giving them information. I said, no, it's much better it comes from him than anybody else. I said, I'm so happy to learn that he's the one supplying it to them instead of someone else, and they just, you know, it's totally fabricated. But if it was true, wouldn't you rather he gave it to them than someone that doesn't like us?
Sure.
They ask you to report when we have Bhagavatam class, we chanted, and if it's all just Krishna conscious activities, we're telling them our preaching activities.
Yeah, right. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Like my son says, if you have to realize the cost to benefit,